Well, welcome to Christ&Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst. And today we're going to be jumping into the waters, tackling the subject of slander and defamation and anonymous accounts on internet comment chat boards, dealing with the issue of Josh Buice, who was the founder and leader of G3 conferences and ministries. He's had to step aside. He's had to step down from his leadership role. He was the pastor of Praise Mill Baptist Church. He's had to step down from that leadership role. Why did he have to step down? Because he was found to be guilty of slander and spreading gossip on anonymous accounts on the internet. So he would set up these accounts, set up a web page, and do writings about people, write people about people, and spread gossip about people and besmirch people. Some of these individuals were actually leaders that would be speaking at the G3 conferences. So here is the founder and president of G3 Ministries and Conferences. These are conferences that hold huge gatherings that tackle relevant Christian evangelical topics and draw thousands of people and attract some of the largest speakers in the evangelical world, some of the famous writers and pastors and speakers, theologians, authors, and some of the best cream of the crop of evangelicalism would speak at these conferences. And here is the president, Josh Buice, of G3 Ministries, of G3 conferences, actually besmirching these same individuals, criticizing, commenting critically of their ministries and their life, and raising questions and accusing them, impinging their motives, all kinds of things. You know, in one case, Vodi Bakum, who was a speaker at G3 and is a well-known pastor in evangelical circles, he developed cancer a few years back, and someone out of kindness started a GoFundMe account, and he raised something like $1.5 million. And so Josh Buice on these anonymous accounts was questioning, well, what happened to all the money? And did he siphon off most of the money for his own self, his own personal use? We've never seen a breakdown of the medical bills and costs and all this. It just really casting aspersions on his supposedly friend and colleague, Vodi Bakum. And he did that with some other leaders in the Southern Baptist Convention and all kinds of other evangelical leaders. So here is this man who doesn't confront or question or converse with these leaders man to man. He just basically goes anonymous on the internet and really acts recklessly and irresponsibly. And that's the thing. The elders of his church and some other people began to be suspicious that some of these anonymous accounts sounded a lot like Josh Buice when he writes and when he speaks. And so they questioned him, and they started questioning him a couple years ago. And he denied outright, right at their face, that no, these are not anything to do with me, and actually deflected some of these accounts to some other leaders that he thought might be the author. And so it's just, he's besmirching other people in the process of covering his own trash. So finally, after a couple years, the G3, and it was his board, I believe, that the church confronted him. And finally, after a couple hours of pleading with him and saying, look, we know that this is you. We have conclusive evidence. This is you. You can't get out of this. You need to just go ahead and fess up, do the right thing. And finally, after pulling teeth, he confessed that it was indeed him all along, and that he had been denying this, lying to these elders of his church, lying to the G3 board all along, giving them falsehoods. And This whole thing blew up, and he's out of his G3 leadership position. He's out of his pastor position, and he's pretty much disgraced because not only did he lie, but he attacked some of the fine leaders and besmirched their character and questioned their motives and just ugly stuff that nobody should ever do. And totally unchristian conduct. And he has confessed. He has said, "I'm sorry." He said something to the effect that he was deceived by the deceitfulness of sin, and he takes responsibility for it. And this was unbecoming and not worthy of a Christian minister to do this. And he realizes that was a bad thing. But it's scary to think that a supposedly solid Christian leader, pastor even, exemplar, could be involved in this kind of secret life where he's writing and criticizing and gossiping and slandering people. At one point, I think it was with the Vodi Bakum case, but it could have been somebody else. He wrote in his anonymous account, one of them, he had a number of them, 2 or 3 or 4, that he would post messages on, and he said that he has it under good authority and reliable sources that such and such did this and that. It just made up fabrications out of whole cloth just to smear the character of some of his supposed friends and colleagues in ministry, and criticized John MacArthur and criticized others. Now, is it okay to criticize other Christians? Yes, it is okay to criticize them. Is it okay to criticize famous and influential Christian leaders like John MacArthur? Is it okay to criticize them? Yes, of course. It's not okay in the case of like the Vodi Bakum slander to say falsehoods about them and to raise questions about their character and try to get people to think ill of them. That is not okay. And one of the things that came out was that Josh Buice had gone to the Royce Report, which is sort of a Christian investigative group, and had talked to them in terms of investigating Vodi Bakum and asking where the money went. Where did the $1.5 million GoFundMe account that he received, where did that money go? Was there accountability for that money? And what were his medical expenses and all of these kinds of things? Now, that was kind of sneaky and underhanded to do that to a friend, Vodi Bakum, but maybe he was just wanting someone to investigate into the matter. Maybe he wanted someone to hold Vodi Bakum accountable and to just start asking Vodi to, give a breakdown of the costs so that people would know that this was on the up and up and there wasn't any kind of using the funds for personal gratification and getting rich off the GoFundMe account, the mercy of people who were giving for the operation, the cancer operation. So maybe he was just wanting the Royce Report to investigate. But he really should have gone to Vodi because he knew Vodi and he had ministered with Vodi and they were supposed to be friends and colleagues. And so to sneak off to the Royce Report and ask them to do the investigation was really kind of undermining Vodi. And he did that kind of stuff in other instances to other leaders. So this is bad. Now, is there anything wrong in principle with an anonymous account? No, not necessarily. There might be some reasons why, say, a local pastor could write under an anonymous account or comment under an anonymous account, or what that just simply means is that the account or the comments could be on Twitter, it could be on Instagram, it could be on YouTube, it could be on Facebook. It just means that for whatever reason, you would like to not give your name up front. Now, I could see if there was a real heated, controversial issue and you didn't want to draw the attention of the opponents. If, for example, there's some issue with LGBTQ and your church is in the town where this battle is hot and heavy, and you're trying to oppose, say, boys in grade schools being able to walk into the girls' bathroom whenever they feel like they might be a girl or whatever. Just these crazy laws that we're having all over. Or it could be a local church is trying to defend the high school against boys running in the girls' track team and claiming that they identify as female, so they're allowed to go on the. And it could be that the local pastor there could write an editorial anonymously, or it could be that he wants to make comments editorially so that he doesn't draw the ire of the LGBT activists, the fierce hatred and vitriol of the LGBT activists to his church, and or have them disrupt a service or whatever. So he might, on occasion, do something anonymously, or in other words, not put his full name right there, so that he can sort of make his point but not attract a lot of attention. And so there could be all kinds of situations where, someone might think, well, it would be better if I didn't put my name to this editorial. I want to be able to make my arguments, but I don't want to actually draw negative attention to myself. I don't want to endanger, my family, or, we've seen what can happen in the cancel culture when the leftists are angered by something somebody does. They can come to your house, they can dox you, they can, in one case where the Supreme Court justice, someone actually came to his house, I think it was Brett Kavanaugh, and they were going to kill him. So I can see where there could be, for example, a member of the Supreme Court or someone in government who wants to remain anonymous. In fact, this was actually something that took place in the early founding of our nation, back at the time of the writing of the Bill of Rights and at the time of the writing of the Constitution, and during the debates and conversations about forming a just government. There were a lot of editorials that were anonymous by members of the House of Representatives and local government officials, and some of the leading founding fathers of our nation were not adverse to writing anonymous editorials and making anonymous arguments, because after all, and I've heard people say, no one should ever be writing anonymous comments, or no one should be writing anonymous articles or making anonymous arguments. They need to stand up like a man and say, this is who I am. I pen my name to this argument and all this. And they should be able to just be like a man and face the world and say, this is my argument and this is who I am. The problem is, like I mentioned before, what if you want to make the argument, but you don't want to draw the hate and vitriol of your opponents? And depending on your opponents, if you have a civil discussion and if you have a civil group of people who are opposing each other, then you can do that. And they play by the rules of decorum and civility, and everything's fine. But what if you have an opponent who will stoop to dirty tricks, even violence, to win the argument? You want to make the argument, just like the founding fathers and some of the early thinkers in our nation wanted to make the argument, but they didn't necessarily want to have to look over their shoulder all the time, because people I could see that this could actually really happen in the Civil War time, where just before the Civil War, there were arguments flying fast and furious. If you had someone from the South, for example, making an anti-slavery argument, they could get tarred and feathered. So it depends on the situation. I would not rule out, and I would not say that there's never an opportunity or never a circumstance where you would never ever write an anonymous opinion or editorial or make an anonymous argument in the newspaper or online or some other place. But I would say, generally speaking, Christians should not be hiding behind, anonymous accounts and anonymous comments, because there would really be no need for that. But I heard one pastor talking about this, and he said that, some of these people who are making anonymous comments and articles and things like that, why would we want to listen to them anyway? They're probably, one person, and maybe they have only 1,000 or so followers, and they're keyboard warriors, and so they have really nothing to contribute, and why would we even listen to them anyway? Well, he misses the point here by virtue of the fact that anyone, at any time can make a solid, sound argument. And so what's important is not that some doctor or professor at some university is using the authority of their position as an expert, so-called expert, and that everyone should listen to the expert because he's got a PhD or he's got a degree in microbiology or whatever. That doesn't mean that his argument is sound or is solid. And there could be some keyboard warrior somewhere. It could be a younger person. It could be even like a 20, 21-year-old living in his parents' basement who is making a really solid, good argument that makes sense, that really should be out there and should be interacted with, because it's superior argument than even the so-called experts or some person, some megachurch pastor who has all these followers and has written all kinds of books and is on this conference circuit and speaks everywhere and is a world-famous evangelist or whatever. It doesn't mean that that person's argument is the sound and solid argument. And so we can't rule out the fact that there could be some anonymous person who, for whatever reason, doesn't want to give his name, but he makes a very strong argument and makes a lot of sense. And so his voice needs to be heard. There would be no reason why you should ignore someone just because they make an anonymous argument. Now, that was not the case with Josh Buice. He was not making solid, sound arguments in his anonymous accounts. He was making up things by saying things like, well, I have reliable sources that so-and-so did this, when in fact there's no reliable source that anybody did anything like that. And then questioning somebody like a Vodi Bakum saying, hey, he brought in $1.5 million with his GoFundMe account, but Josh Buice said something to the effect, well, cancer surgery might only cost like $300,000 max, and so what happened to the 1.1 million left? And casting aspersions on a Christian leader with no evidence. I mean, it's totally uncharitable. That's another aspect of this whole thing. He did not show Christian charity toward a brother. Why would he accuse Vodi Bakum of, siphoning off $1.1 million, using it for his own personal reasons? Why would he accuse him of doing that without any evidence? Wouldn't the assumption be that I'm sure he's using it responsibly? I'm sure he's using it in a Christian manner. I have no reason to believe that he would abuse this gift that was given to him by hundreds, maybe thousands of people as an act of mercy to help him with medical expenses. I have no reason to believe that this godly man would misuse and mishandle these funds. Why not take that approach? Why would you go the opposite approach and say, this guy, question his motives, attribute ill will to him, attribute selfishness and corruption? No, why would you do that? Especially if you're his friend, supposedly. Because these men have worked together and knew each other and considered each other friends. So this is bad. This is bad because it shows that Josh Buice had some junk in his heart, ill will in his heart. And he, instead of talking to these leaders and men, he would sneak off into the shadows and just shoot arrows at them. Obscured in obscurity, he'd shoot arrows at them. What, to try to get them, take them down some way? Or he, for example, this group, the G3, they're cessationists, meaning they don't believe that the supernatural, miraculous gifts of the New Testament are still in operation. They don't believe in prophecy. They don't believe in all this. What we find in 1 Corinthians that Paul talks about, which is not the main historic Christian position. The historic Christian position is that, well, God does whatever he wants to do, and he could restore prophecy, or he could have prophecy operate in someone's life if he wanted to, and it could be a gift. And same way with healing, God could use someone to be supernatural in their prayers for the sick. And only, we're open-minded. We're not closed-minded and saying this cannot happen because this is not the dispensation of miracles, or making artificial grids and classifications and everything. So G3 is big into that kind of cessationism. And so Josh Buice, in one of these anonymous accounts, he criticized John MacArthur for inviting John Piper to speak at some gathering. And John Piper is not a cessationist. He believes that, like the historic church, that gifts can come and go, and God can use this person and that person if he wants to, give them this gift and that gift and whatever he wants to do. And so he's open-minded to supernatural activity today. And so Josh Buice, I guess, was really bothered by that. So he questioned John MacArthur's wisdom in inviting John Piper to his gathering. Well, it's okay to question John MacArthur. There's nothing wrong with questioning John MacArthur. I guess some people think that it's not appropriate to question John MacArthur, but it is. John MacArthur is a man, just like Billy Graham was a man. You could question Billy Graham. I remember at the time, as a young college student, that Billy Graham visited the Soviet Union, USSR, before the communism fell. And they took him around and wined him and dined him and took him all to the right places and basically used Billy Graham as a propaganda tool. And Billy Graham came back and said, I don't see much oppression here, and everything that I've seen has really been good. And just being used by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union as sort of a puppet. And I said, what in the world did Billy Graham do to go over there and play into the hands of the Soviet Union and the communists? Because they really played him like a fiddle and used him for their purposes to showcase to the world how great communism is. And Billy Graham sort of fell into that, and I criticized Billy Graham for that. Well, is there something wrong with criticizing Billy Graham? No. Would there have been something wrong criticizing Billy Graham anonymously in some comment or chat board or even in an anonymous article? No. I don't know why, unless unless there was some reason why, say, you work at the Billy Graham Association, I think it's the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association. If you were an employee at the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association at the time that Billy Graham went to the Soviet Union and met with the Russian leaders and, gave his glowing positive evaluation of USSR, and you wrote an editorial and said, I really think it was a mistake for Dr. Billy Graham to go to the Soviet Union, and you worked at the Billy Graham Evangelicals, that could be a problem because that could cause some friction. So I could see where you might want to write an anonymous article, but there's nothing in principle wrong with doing that. I think the thing is you have to be willing to own what you've written. And what Josh Buice did was he actually denied that he was writing these articles and making these comments. And that lying is wrong. The devil is the father of lies. We are to be honest, and truth matters. Just like in the New Testament, Ananias and Sapphira said that they were giving all of the proceeds of their land sale to the church. And then when it came down time to do that, they only gave a portion of it. They gave a large portion of it, but they didn't give all of it. And they were confronted for this. And it says that the Lord struck them down because they lied to the Holy Spirit. So truth is a very big thing with the Christian church, and Christian ministers should be leaders of truth and examples of truth. And Josh Buice flat out lied to his elders and to the board of the G3 and denying this. And there's no excuse for that. So I think that was the worst part, that he actually was willing to go so far as to lie instead of just saying, well, you got me. I guess I was a coward. I didn't want to criticize these influential men like John MacArthur directly, so I did it in secret, and I'm sorry for that. I want to apologize to everyone that I've besmirched and gossiped behind their back and criticized in a sneaky way and all this. And I think it would have been better to just come out and be honest and tell the truth. But no, he hid behind and denied. And finally, after just pressing, they said it was a 2-hour meeting. Finally, at the end of 2 hours, he finally confessed, yeah, that is me. And these are my accounts. And I was saying these things. So I think he can be forgiven by the fellow leaders that he besmirched. I think Christians can forgive him. God, of course, can forgive him if he's truly repentant, and he can start over. But man, this is a wake-up call for people. Don't say things behind people's back. Don't speak things anonymously that you wouldn't be willing to own if they were made public. And be very careful how you treat your fellow Christians in word and deed, and act charitable toward all. Well, I hope that's been helpful in trying to process this whole Josh Buice controversy, and we will see you back another day. God bless.